about a managed service provider. If you have one, that's great. If you're getting everything you expect, that's great. But sometimes you don't know what questions to ask. How do you benchmark them? What do they do? Are they in line with current trends? All that kind of stuff. So again, if you're not familiar with the acronym MSP, it's a third party that actually manages your IT services. I mean, obviously, you're really good at what you do. Your core competency is serving the community and fundraising and other things like that, giving it back to community. But oftentimes, to run an organization, you do need some technical expertise to make sure that there's enough tools and technologies and platform available for you to do your job better and faster. And how do you do more with less? And that's where technology plays a big role. So of course, we are considered as one of the managed service provider thanks to the partnership with Idaho Nonprofit Center. We have good rhythm with them and how we can help their members in Idaho. So looking forward to that discussion today and see where we can engage and add value. And if you think you have specific needs, there's going to be a form that will be shared towards the end of this webinar, and you can feel free to submit your information and we'll reach out to you as well. With that said, I'm going to quickly high level go through why choose a managed services provider. As I said, most of the organizations that we typically work with are under 25 employees. We have some that are large, but they still don't have a dedicated IT person on their payroll for a lot of reasons. Number one, really you don't know how to even keep up with that stuff. Talent retention is an issue, how to grow them into that role. They're not challenged enough because no one else in the organization is technical enough. So organizations that size and below prefer to use a third party to get their IT services, and prefer that model that they can do on an ongoing basis or on a retainer basis, where they basically get those services on a contractual term or something like that. So of course, an MSP like ours gets involved with lots of nonprofits. We see the trends, we bring you what's best in class, where things are going. You don't have to do your own research, benchmarking, and what do you need to do with employee, workforce productivity, retention, given everything has changed with pandemic and COVID, like what do you do to keep your people motivated and things like that. So it's not just about cost savings, but of course, it's about bringing best practices into your organization. Like how do you, as I said, improve productivity? How do you manage your compliance, risk, data loss prevention, business continuity, disaster recovery? If something were to happen, do you know if you can able to recover your data? We hear about ransomware breaches all the time that impacts everyone's brand, including the organizations, right? How do you deal with all that kind of stuff? And of course, again, as I said, trends, what's the new technology in the market? What will help me connect with my stakeholders better, whether it is members in the community or donors, or even my nonprofit agencies that I work with, local agencies that I collaborate with. That would be another thing to look at. And so someone like us, or companies like us who do this, who are in the business of MSP, really focus on that kind of portfolio and stack. And they're usually a team of dedicated experts. They bring a team, not just one person, with varied level of expertise. One could be networking expert, another could be security expert, another could be data analyst, one more person could be more of a collaboration specialist, like how do you collaborate, share data, real time, those kind of things. So again, it comes as a package. And of course, your day-to-day help desk support, break fix, computer replacement, virtual, software updates, configurations, patches. So again, I can go over and over, but just wanted to let you know that those are the kind of services that are needed to stay current and not have any technical debt. So again, there's two different approaches. One is like a proactive support model where you engage with a service organization that helps you be prepared for most situations. You're not reactive. I'll give you an example. A couple of nonprofits we've been working with, they were actually in a hybrid mode even before pandemic. What does that mean? They didn't need to come to office to access their data. They could actually directly access, or they could access through a VPN solution. Most of the day, smaller organizations are going all cloud-based, so VPN is not needed unless you have a server or any other data set that is local to the area or organization, and you need. But that has its pros and cons, and we don't need to go into detail, but like fire, flood, power loss, like what do you do in those situations? So a proactive approach is like you are working with a partner and you're ready for any situation. You're collaborating without depending on a physical location or dependent on an employee being there. We had a United Way organization in, I think it was in Iowa, where one of the employee machine acted as a file share, where if that employee is in the office, everyone will have access to the files when they're in the office. But if that person is gone, they can't. So that their computer was serving as a file server, for lack of better terms. And so we have seen those kind of situations to where like, I don't need anyone. I'm on best-in-class productivity tool. I can access my files anywhere from my iPad, smartphone, from my computer, or just a computer with a browser, as long as there's security in place. So those best practices come with a proactive. There's a reactive approach where you just procure the services as events happen, and it's usually trying to recover from a situation or something that you really need to get out of, kind of a thing. So we definitely support proactive model, and we'll get into details as well. But I think that's where a lot of vulnerabilities and bugs and things like uncovered, just because you're keeping an eye on the system and infrastructure all the time. I try to keep it very high level, but I do have a tendency to get very tactical sometimes. So please throw something in the chat window. Kate is helping me monitor, and we can obviously keep it very simple and make sure it makes sense. So what's today's workforce looks like? More and more companies and organizations we're talking to, like, we're hybrid workplace. Like, we're not asking our employees to like come in every day, and it varies from individual organizations leadership to culture, what they want to offer their employees in terms of flexibility. A lot of them like, look, we care about the outcomes and we want to get the job done. We really don't care when they do it, how to do that, and there's no right or wrong. There's extreme ends. There are companies who have never had offices, and there are companies like who have had offices, and it's good for team building, but we're also going to spend a lot of time with our community and our donors. And so I think hybrid is going to work for us anyway. So to make that real, of course, you need some good set of collaboration tools, communication tools, transparency. I mean, one of our customers was primarily working out of text messages, and we work with them to give them examples like, look, if somebody leaves, that information is not retrievable, and you should go on a platform that you have access to information even if the person leaves. And so a lot of organizations we talk to, they're like using outlook.com, which is like personal version, or Hotmail or Gmail or Yahoo. They don't even use company assets for these conversations or productivity tool set. So we'll get into that detail as well. But here's a quick chart on what it looks like. And this was a study published a couple of years back. It's actually quite dated, but the preferences have not changed. And so, what is contrasting is the in-person meeting is like really coming back for a lot of, for at least few generations, right? So the Gen Z is like, yeah, we like in-person meeting. We like the energy. We like it all real time. Some are like, no, we like half and half. In-person is good. Online is good. Just like we're conducting this webinar. Of course, we like to be at a lot of conferences, but we're also able to interact and engage through online tools and things like that. So you'll get this as part of our slide deck. But I just find it interesting, like how different generations like to work. I know I talk to a lot of people is like, I really don't want to get on phone with anyone. Like if I have to talk to airline, I would prefer to send a message on a chat or a text. I just don't like calling. And so again, individual preferences, but we just wanted to share. And I think the companies and organizations have to evolve to meet, and I think this is one of the unique times where we are seeing all four generations in workforce. So we have to evolve and find a way to make sure that You give them a good set of platform tools, technologies. They can all work together without feeling like they don't get their preferential ways to engage and interact, things like that. So we obviously focus heavily on Microsoft Productivity Suite for several reasons. Number one is what their philanthropy program is amazing. So some of you may be aware of something like TechSoup, where you get nonprofit discounted pricing. It's like almost at a high level, I would say 80% discounted than compared to what for-profit customers pay. And it's the exact set of functionality that you will get when a large corporation, with 100,000 employees buys the same tool set that a nonprofit buys. There's not like any difference if you were to compare the same SKU that they offer. Obviously, you get all the applications like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook. But what you also get is things like OneDrive, which will basically store everything, all your important files in the cloud. If something happens to your computer, we have seen customers who've forgotten their machines at airport, or they've been lost and they are not encrypted, and there's data locally on those computers that's gone. It could be PII, confidential. So OneDrive is a great example where you store everything in the cloud. It's secure. It maintains backup copies, like multiple copies of the data over a 30-day period by default. You can share with colleagues. You can apply permissions. So I'm not going to go in detail but the point I'm trying to make is these are the tools available at very discounted pricing that can make collaboration very convenient and also secure. Now, some of you might be on a Google stack, or Google platform, which is great too. It comes with Google Docs, Google Sheets, but again, it doesn't necessarily have the same thing like Microsoft offers when it comes to the application running on your computer. You're still dependent on being like online tool, where you do a web version of some of those. In this one, you can do co-authoring where multiple people can, comment on the document. Like a lot of customers will save their version, add their initials of their first name and last name, email it back for someone to work in. And that person makes changes, does the same thing. And there's like 10 copies of those documents, going back and forth. Whereas here, you just share the location where the file is, all of them work together. It's ready, whether it is a grant submission, a proposal. You are just taking out a lot of back and forth. You're eliminating error reduction. Basically, you're minimizing those errors, and you always have the latest and greatest. And that's what co-authoring and document sharing really helps with. You don't need to be in office because everything is in cloud. You just go online, you log in with your Microsoft credentials. Hopefully, if you heard of a multi-factor authentication, if not, we highly recommend that everyone should be on multi-factor authentication because user credentials can leak or can be stolen. But as long as you have a multi-factor authentication on your phone, then you get a notification on your phone, you approve, and then you can log in and access your documents. So what we see is customers who don't have MFA and have their credentials, stolen or leaked, basically are risking their, entire organization data set. Again, there's pros and cons, but it's no different than anybody getting on your computer remotely through a virus or malware and then encrypting all that and then, making, asking for ransomware. And you've seen ransomware stories in the news, including nonprofits as well. So I'm not going to necessarily double click on that right now. So again, the goal is how do we maximize productivity using these tools? Teams is a great one. We use it for instant messaging where we can ask quick questions with our colleagues. You can document share. You can collaborate externally with other organizations by sending them in instant messages. If there's a organization, nonprofit you work with and they use Teams, you use Teams, then you can just go across the organization boundary. We have seen several nonprofits take advantage of this entire collaboration suite that's listed here. And you don't have to use everything. Like I tell, like Power Automate, for example, is not for everyone, but Excel, Word, PowerPoint, OneDrive, Teams is definitely something that customers should use. And if you're okay with, online version of like Google, that's great. Make sure it's secure. and it gives you what you need in terms of data loss prevention and security as well. Kate, just curious, are there any questions, or do we need to pause here in terms of just making sure we give everyone opportunity to ask questions?
I haven't seen any in the chat, but I'd love to take a pause for questions if anybody has any.
Maybe not, looks like.
Nope, don't see any hands.
Okay, so let's see. Let's talk a little bit about, how do you collaborate effectively within your organization or within your department, of your organization. So like this meeting that is being held through Zoom can be held through Teams as well. Good news is the meeting can continue after the meeting is done. Like if you have a question or a follow-up, you can potentially send a message and your stakeholders will get an update. You can obviously do one-on-one communication through this. You can do, as I said, Teams communication on this. You can schedule impromptu meetings. You get a planner, tool, which actually helps you manage your tasks. Like, the deadlines, you can assign the tasks. It sends reminders. You can create a dashboard. It actually creates a dashboard for you. What's bucket-wise classification, who's doing what. You can rearrange by deadline, all that kind of thing. You can create a checklist within a planner, and you can check off things that are done. That way you don't have to worry about forgetting something. A lot of HR units are using Planner for employee onboarding and offboarding, things like that. You can also have your team calendar that can be in a channel, which is part of the Teams. There's some really good videos out there in YouTube if you want to explore that. And you can create group notebooks in OneNote and things like that. Another thing I wanted to mention was if you use Microsoft 365, now they're rolling out a feature called Schedule Meetings with Me, where you can actually publish a link in your email signature, and people can go and look at your free busy availability, and they can schedule meetings with you. It could be your community members, your local collaborators that you work with, your donors, whoever. They'll click on the link and they'll see when you're free and busy. It doesn't reveal any other information except your availability. You don't need to necessarily buy a separate tool, for example, like Calendly, to make that scheduling and pay for it. It's included in the a subscription you get with Office 365 or Microsoft 365. So again, a lot of us don't have admins to schedule our calendars, and so if you can minimize back and forth with your collaborators, with your stakeholders, by just letting them pick a time when you are available, that's great. The scheduling happens. It sends a video conferencing link when the scheduling happens. It sends an invite to both the parties. It's easy. And so I think these are very powerful features that continue to evolve as software gets updated periodically. It's not like you have to wait. You bought Office version and then you have to wait a few more years to upgrade, and it's on a rolling basis, if that makes sense. Let me take a pause here and see how many of you are already on modern platforms like Microsoft 365 or Google. I'm just curious to understand what the technical landscape of this cohort looks like. Anyone wants to share with us or where they are in their journey?
I can call on folks too if we're feeling shy. Why don't we, I'd love to hear from Laura. Laura, if you're there, if you want to share with us.
I am here. Yeah, okay. So actually throughout the last couple years, what I've noticed is there's so many different platforms. So I came specifically from government and public health, and so everybody uses Microsoft. But the more I get into nonprofit stuff and the creative side, a lot of people use Apple or let's say project management stuff with Asana or Google Docs. So that's kind of, I think all the things are wonderful, but at the same time, it seems to be like there's a learning curve or a little bit of frustration if different multidisciplines are coming together and they're all used to using different platforms.
Yeah, great point, Laura, and thanks, Ian, for picking Laura for lack of it. But you make a great point. And look, and I talk to executives at nonprofits. What I see is, yes, they're all best of breed tools and they can do the job. But then you also have redundant costs to deal with, right? So Asana, for example, high level project management, or even it can go very deep. You can accomplish the same thing by Planner, which is already would be included in a productivity subscription like Microsoft 365. And so then I think the CFOs and others asking question like, should we not be looking at our donors' money more carefully and not have redundant tool set? That same thing happens. For example, I was giving on like Calendly versus Bookings. Like, can I not use Bookings, which is part of my subscription, and it will do the same thing. Same thing with let's see, Dropbox and OneDrive, right? It comes up all the time. Like, why am I paying for Dropbox when OneDrive is already included and part of my, single user fee? And then we're all connected. Same thing with some use Slack versus Teams. Like, okay, so I have to buy Slack, I have to buy Dropbox, I have to buy Zoom, I have to buy Asana, and I have to buy Calendly. All individual tools, I have to pay them separately versus how can I bring this all together? So again, we're not saying like we're one way or other. It's just like what is more efficient, both from total cost of ownership as well as economics. And I think that's where things come together really well. Ian, anyone else you want to poll? I don't want to necessarily.
Well, we've got a couple in the chat here.
Awesome.
Jesse Tree, Cassandra with Jesse Tree uses Google, and we have another Google in the chat from FSA for anything that's non-confidential. Maybe somebody else we haven't heard from here. Let's see here. Maybe Robert, would you want to share with us what your organization uses?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Michelle, maybe you want to reiterate what the question was for Bob here in camera.
Yeah, we were just curious if your organization uses one platform versus other for day-to-day employee collaboration. Are you mostly on Microsoft software or Google or both or?
Microsoft.
Got it. So again, it's a choice, and we'll go into some of the success stories and like how converging everything into one has helped. And it can be either or. It doesn't have to one versus other. It just depends on how you want to bring your teams together. A lot of this is doable on either platforms. And so question is, are you taking any steps to modernize your day-to-day office productivity? Is your leadership supportive? Is your board supportive? Those are the questions that we have dealt with in the past and see how things go. So here's an example. And I know there's a lot on this things like before a software like Teams or Slack would come, you would email the file to your team, or then you, as I said, you would put your version 1, version 2, they will go back and forth until the other person is done. You wouldn't be working on your changes because now you have to think about merging those changes and all that. Those things are all, basically gone. And I won't necessarily go line by line here, but real-time sharing, real-time collaboration, not worrying about having an updated version, not worrying about, computer hard drive crashing and not having access to data is so key to these platforms and the cloud-based computing tools. So, excuse me, we'll leave this, we'll share this deck, but again, makes it super easy to collaborate and be super productive, I call it, because at the end of the day, it helps you actually save time. And anytime you save time, you're putting more impact in the community back, is how we look at it, working with the nonprofits, right? Same thing, like what else do you can get with this tool set? You get forms. Now, some people use let's see, for surveys and all that, they will use SurveyMonkey. They will use, there's one more utility out there for creating impromptu forms and collecting data. Advanced user use Qualtrics, but for basic forms, Microsoft Forms is included in the Office 365 stack as well. As I talked about the planner, some people use Asana and some people use actually proper version of Microsoft Project, but for most of the business productivity discussion, workflow initiatives, things like that, tracking a campaign, tracking an event, delivering a campaign with deadlines, that can all be done via planners. Couple of things in terms of scenarios for automation, like if you were to use Teams and you need to track like any finance requests and approvals, you can use the approvals feature. It has full end-to-end tracking. It will, if there's ever an audit, you know exactly who approved it, what. You're not relying on an email approval because it's all built into the system. We have seen more and more organizations use for employee onboarding, offboarding activities and things like that as well, to just streamline the flow. People know exactly what needs to be done when. In a smaller organization, an office like manager might be doing a lot of these activities themselves, especially with 25 or less employees, as there's not necessarily a dedicated HR department. In some cases, there might be. So for organizations who are standing up, like I heard, I forgot, but what was it? Ian, remind me. So one of attendees today said they're actually starting a new nonprofit organization, right? So, or they're in the process. So for a greenfield deployment like this, you can start with the best platform initially and not worry about stitching it all together.
Yeah, I think that was Laura who spoke up that talked about that.
Yeah.
Laura, correct me if I'm wrong here.
Okay, so I will continue. So how have we worked? Like, what have we done with nonprofits? So you'll see obviously a lot of United Ways on the, we call it our customer list. Obviously, we are one of the 4 shortlisted technology service provider for the United Way worldwide. So we're connected very well to the United Way ecosystem. Over a period of time, we are also helping nonprofits that are outside of United Way ecosystem. Of course, Idaho Nonprofit Center is one. We work with Parenting Resource Center in Austin, Minnesota, another example. Damien Center in Indianapolis. USA Football, which actually gets funded through NFL for youth football programs, things like that. And again, this is just a select few that is not an exclusive list of our customers. And what we do is we come in, we basically try to do an assessment like where you are in your technology journey. And we even help you compare and contrast, like where are others? What are they doing? Is there anything that you guys are missing? You might be ahead, you might be behind. As I said, not everybody is going to be a leader at the cutting edge of technology, and not everybody is going to be having technical debt either. So it just depends where you're on a journey. Are you using latest and greatest? What do you need to do to stay current, to minimize your risks when it comes to data loss or breach or those? So we'll have those conversations. We'll do an assessment, what work needs to be done. You have several options to choose if you decide to engage with our services. Of course, as part of this program, you will get a discount because of our partnership with Idaho Nonprofit Center. And of course, we try to repeat a very standard program, a playbook, I call it, that works for most of the nonprofits. We try to make sure that we keep your costs, optimal, given that nonprofits rely a lot on donors' money, grants, and so we have to make sure every dollar that is spent gets, stretches to the highest possible form. And of course, the service we provide is mostly remote. If there's a need for on-site, we can do that. We have helped nonprofits write the grants, win those, get those grants approved, or modernize their technology stack, whether it is replacing their aged computers, keeping them current on latest and greatest software, connecting them with the right vendors to order the computers for them and modernize their asset inventory and things like that. Some of them have been on a very long aging cycle, I call it. So we do all of that for sure. And then, of course, we provide remote help desk services where you would put in a ticket and our engineers or technicians will get and help, whether it is onboarding a new user or any issues with existing users, any new software that needs to be taken care of, basic tasks to all the way to networking, conference room setups, wireless, any technology that might come up or needs that might come up. We are happy to cover the entire portfolio. We have not necessarily listed everything we do. I mean, of course, it's all on our website, so you can obviously go there and take a look. And if need be, we're happy to have those conversations and help you understand where you are or where you need to go and take it from there. Of course, there's some examples here. We are based out of Indiana, but we have customers, as you can see, across the board, different parts of the map. One example is Chris who's listed as the former SVP of United Way of Central of Indiana. He relocated to North Carolina, especially Raleigh-Durham area. He became the vice president of United Way of Greater Triangle, and he really wanted to replicate the model that we had with him when he was at Central Indiana. And so he obviously brought us on board, and within a few months, we were able to modernize a lot of technology over there that was quite aging and was on its last leg. So again, examples here, we have worked closely with Kevin Bailey, of course, in the past as well, and how that modernization has taken place. So we have ample references if you want to consider talking to them, things like that. So here's an example when Kevin was former CEO at Southeastern Idaho. Of course, we took them to a very I call it siloed infrastructure. They had a server on site, which was kind of aging. Somebody had to be in the office to log into QuickBooks and whatnot. Now everybody operates independently. People still have access to latest and greatest data. Everything flows seamlessly and very smooth, so it doesn't need to be there. And of course, all of those details you'll find on the stories that we publish on our website as well. It's very relevant, and I'm sure you'll find it that your pain points might be similar, if not, very different. So here's another one from Molly Lenke in Mower County, in the state of Minnesota as well. She was exactly in the same place that I've been talking about, like very challenging environment to collaborate remotely, and they were just proactively ready before the pandemic hit, when nobody was going to offices. And by the way, it's not just about sharing documents, but we also bring telephony in the mix as well. So if you don't want to provide your employees with cell phone stipend, or want to make sure that they use their business phones, then we can actually bring business phones on their computers, and they don't even have to be in office. So we use voice over IP for that as well. So here's another one from Austin Aspires, a nonprofit in Minnesota as well. And very, very similar stories where now they all work collaboratively to service their customers, donors, stakeholders in the community. So again, there's few stories that I don't necessarily go over all, but they all had similar challenges in terms of where they were. So we'll probably leave it in the deck and go from there. So again, if you think there's a need, we are here as a partner to Idaho Nonprofit Center, and we would be thrilled to engage and help. As I said, no one should be left behind in the technology journey just because of the size of the organization. You all will use the same tools and technologies that multinational billion-dollar organizations uses. So it's about, it should not be about technical inequality is what I call it. We're all able to use it thanks to some great nonprofit programs from industry leaders in technology. And I think it's a great way to look at things and modernize. So key takeaways is, question to ask is, if something were to happen to your office infrastructure, do you have a disaster recovery preparedness? Like, do you have a business continuity plan? Can you replicate your data within 24 to 48 hours if something were to happen? Do you have any policies around secure data, especially PII or confidential data? Are you using the right tools for that, for both secure data security, data loss prevention, and collaborating within the employees? Are you able to share with both internal and external stakeholders securely? And when I say that securely means not just via email, but maybe a password protected document that only the person on the other end can open with a password and things like that. And then if there are any redundant tasks that your employees do all day, every day, can you find an opportunity to automate it? And what does that look like? So those are the areas where we can help. We have helped several customers, as you saw in the previous slide, and we'll be happy to come and replicate that playbook. Again, as I said, any areas of improvement you feel that are good, feel free to reach out to us. We'll share the link of a form to quickly submit that will have some very basic questions. And we'll be happy to engage, review, and establish your internal policies on data and security. The boards are asking for it more and more. It won't be too late or too soon for your board to not ask. So that is something that they do look into it as part of the ongoing processes. And then you have to determine whether you need a support of an external organization like ours who can help you, from an organizational perspective and uplift and give that uplift on the technology roadmap. Here's our contact information. Of course, you can reach us via email, phone, and I think, Kate, what's the plan to share the form if somebody wants to contact us or schedule some time with us?
I believe Ian was going to submit the URL following this call.
Okay. So I
And
think we are about I think 45 minutes into the session. We are happy to take any questions, or if you have any immediate needs, happy to discuss those. Either way works for us. So Ian, I'll hand it back off to you.
All right, thank you, Vishal. Great presentation. Yeah, so we're going to open it up here to questions. If you guys want to learn more about IT services in general or Unity Tech, now is the time. We'll follow up with the slides after this session along with the recording. And I did put a link in the chat to learn more about these services, which will also follow up in another email. But I'd like to just pause and take a moment for any questions that you guys have. And we'll let Kate and Vishal field those questions for you.